Hello and welcome to Summit and Beyond. This podcast is about men's health and how we set our boundaries and sort of find our moral compass going through life. Today's episode is going to cover, I suppose it's about boundaries, and it's about how I've set boundaries for myself. It's about the contrast between being creative and being empathetic and having wisdom and determination. This is my first episode in what I would say is going to be quite a regular series of me uploading now. This is coming from a different place. I've had quite a lot of time off, and I have tried to come back in various different ways using the outdoors and friends that I've got who are really successful. I did an interview with Jack Oliver, which was brilliant, but I just kind of needed to go away from it all for a bit again and come back. And this time when I've come back, it's feeling very different. It's for a different reason, and I wanted to kind of start with the foundation of why I'm here today and why I'm uploading these podcasts and why I've started blogging again and why you're starting to see me post quite regularly on social media. The contrast between being creative and being empathetic and having wisdom and determination, I think they're two important but very different trains of being, or what's the word, or what's the description? It's like it is a way of being. It's like a mindset that you're in at the time. So if you're feeling creative, generally when you're feeling creative, you will have empathy. You will be feeling a lot more emotion, which allows the creativity to flow. When you're tapping into your wisdom, your experience, you become, or I should say, I become very focused on what's in front of me and what I know I need to do to get through that moment. And one side, the creative, empathetic approach, can leave you quite vulnerable because you're opening. You like, if you want to talk about it in like a spiritual way, or kind of like the abstract spirituality, it's like you're opening your heart, you're opening your energy to the universe, to everything around you, and that can leave you quite vulnerable. Whereas when you're using your wisdom and you're being determined and direct and focused, it's like I create a hard shell around myself which doesn't allow anything to penetrate it in order for me to get through to the next step or the next stage of what I'm doing. And so they're very different from each other, but they're both essential. And what I've found in the last couple of years or so is that I recognized that I was spending a lot of time, or if I wasn't in my creative, empathetic self, I was trying to get back there. But when I was in it, I was vulnerable, and I was allowing people to come into my life, or situations to come into my life which were detrimental to me. I was allowing things to take me away from my creativity, and I had no boundaries, or very little boundaries, or I didn't have clear boundaries, let's put it that way. I think that's the right way to describe it. I didn't have clear boundaries, and I didn't really know what my boundaries were for myself, and so I would get wrapped up in other people's ideas, and I'd soon become lost and then left, and then I'd feel really alone. Then some things happened. The last couple of years have been really tough, especially the last 12 months. It's been horrendous, but I've managed to keep this sense of happy. I feel happy. I've got this sense of feeling happy inside, and that's not gone anywhere. And I'm really proud of myself. It sounds really weird to say that I'm proud of myself for remaining happy, but I am. I've got to this point in my life where I feel like I can hold that energy inside me, but that's the way that I've been able to do that is to create this like hard shell around myself. And ultimately what happens when you harden up, when you put that shell around yourself, is you become harder to the world outside, because you don't want to let people in. You don't want to have that empathy. You don't want people to encroach on you. You don't want to be creative and vulnerable. I want to be wise and determined. I want people to see that, oh, this guy knows where he's going. We need to leave him alone. I was trying to give off that vibe. And the term's thrown around a lot at the moment, toxic masculine or toxic masculinity. And I think that's definitely a version of that, where you become so hardened to the world around you that you're just repelling it away all the time. And you come across like a grumpy old man. You come across like somebody who's stuck in the ways and won't let go of certain ideas. And that's a protective mechanism. I've never truly got to understand that until I hit 40, and now I'm like middle-aged, if you like. I'm sort of understanding why I see men who are like that, who seem really pissed off with life. And it's like, I understand why now. You've created this hard shell around yourself, because whenever you've acted vulnerable or whenever you've allowed yourself to be vulnerable, people have taken advantage of that. And so you realize that that's not productive. And so you create this hard shell and you become focused. And whenever somebody says to you, like, why don't you just relax? Why don't you just become creative? Why don't you have empathy? It's like, because that doesn't work. And so on reflection, I started to realize that I'd created this hard shell around myself. And yeah, it's because of wisdom. And I'm saying wisdom because I met a brilliant woman the other day, and we just randomly met saying hello to each other's dogs. And then she's called Lou, or Louise, and we got chatting about spirituality. She's writing a book about spirituality, and we got talking about the darkness and the light in life, and how that we're trying to be the light in life. And sometimes the light switches off and the darkness floods the room. But it's about knowing where that light switch is and being able to switch it straight back on. And that comes down to a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy type tools. Like when we were talking, I was thinking a lot about CBT and how I've implemented that into my life, and how that helps me to keep the light on. It helps me to keep centered and keep moving towards the me that I want to become, the me that I want to be, the me that I believe I should be. And I found just lately that I'd become quite hardened to the world and didn't want to let anybody in and didn't want to be vulnerable. I was happy in myself, but whenever something external came towards me, it's like, get away with anger, leave me alone. And that's not healthy. I think it's about having a balance between that, boundaries, understanding where your boundaries lie and being firm with them. And if anybody tries to cross that boundary, that's where the hard shell comes in. That's where the wisdom comes in, and the determination to make sure that you stay on your path and do the right thing for you, or stay on my path and do the right thing for me. To do that, I have to have boundaries in place. I have to be able to move towards I have to be able to continue on the direction that my moral compass points me in. But then I also need space to be creative. I haven't been creative. For about a year, I've been really struggling to get back on social media, promoting the things that I'm doing. And I did wonder why I'd wanted to do that. I did wonder why that was a pressure I was putting on myself at first. And then I let go of that. And then it's since I've been spending time with friends, with the boys mainly, and I found a beautiful woman. I found a partner who is, well, she found me, or we found each other really, but she reached out to me and I thought, okay, like, I'm going to go along with this. And it's turned out to be a beautiful relationship and it's going really well. But also my friends are like, I only keep a certain amount of friends, and I'm become very careful about who I trust and who I spend my time with. But when I do spend time with them and I come away, I feel inspired to then be vulnerable. They allow me to be vulnerable with them, which then fills me, it opens my heart, it fills me with a sense of confidence. And then when I come away from them, I feel like I can be my authentic self and I can open myself and allow my energy to flow. But that ultimately makes me more vulnerable. But because now I've spent some time building this harder exterior, setting these boundaries in place, I now have a good fortress to explore from, to adventure from, if you like. So it's been a really interesting time for me. At times I felt quite lonely because I've been pushing people away and I've been trying to do it on my own. And then at times I felt worthy. I don't think worthy is the right word. Accepting of the love that comes from my friendship group. And then I have been able to recognize that I don't need this hard exterior, because the people who are around me, who are closest to me, who love me, will only nurture me, and they'll tell me when I'm overstepping the mark with something, or they believe I am, or I'm doing the right thing. They'll be honest with me. And so I feel very fortunate to have those people in my life, and I feel very fortunate to be able to start being creative again and uploading. The reason I've started uploading again is because I feel if you think of being happy like a jar, so if there's a jar of happiness and you're filling it up each day, like I'm looking at my life at the moment, and there's so many, I'm not going to go into details, but there's so much drama going on around me. And I don't feel direct, although I am directly involved with it in some way, shape or form. I've been dragged into it in some way, shape or form. I'm not attached to it. It's not altering the way that I feel about myself, which is a really powerful thing, because in the past, it would have destroyed me. It would have caused me a lot of mental, psychological and physical pain going through these things. But now it's almost like my jar of happiness is full, and I keep it full. And I got this sense of being like, I'm okay. If I can be dealing with all this stuff that's going on in my life right now and I'm still happy, I'm okay. I've got something to give. I'm overflowing with it, so I can give. And so how do I want to give? Well, I want to be creative. I want to open my heart. I want to be vulnerable again. I want to do this. So what do I want to do? And I was thinking, I can't fathom what I want to do with myself. And then I just thought, well, why don't you just write about that? So I got Summit and Beyond, the blog site, back up, and I started blogging again. And then I thought, well, Rob from BattleFit and he's starting up his coaching business called Believe. And I thought, well, and we're going to do a podcast together. So I thought, well, why don't I just start speaking again? Why don't I just start sharing my truth? And that will build us up to doing the Battle and Beyond podcast at some point, and it's taking that first step towards that. And it's coming from a place of me wanting to do it for myself, to release that full jar, to empty it a little bit. And if you listen to this, if you're listening to it and it resonates with you and you get something from it, then brilliant. Like, if nobody listens to it, then it just feels better for me to get it out there. So that's why I'm doing it. And I think that's a change for me. I was talking to Louise about it, the lady that I met on the street the other day. That's another thing in itself, is that as soon as you open your heart, these people just walk into your life. You just start to like, oh, well, you randomly met this amazing person who I'd never met before. Stop on the street and speak to for an hour. We were talking about, as well as the light and the dark, we were talking about how we want. We want to grasp for things outside of ourselves. So in the past, it was I'm uploading YouTube videos to teach people navigation, to try and sell them a navigation course. The end result was me reaching out to people going, please buy my service. And what I realized it's creative making a video, but the creative endeavor has the ultimate goal of manipulating somebody to come and buy a service off me, which is fine. That's how a business works. Like, you've got to promote you and advertise what you're doing and show that you've got the skills to do it. People learning navigation want to know that the person that they're learning the navigation from is really good at the navigation. So doing YouTube is a way to show that. But ultimately, I'm thinking I want this business to be successful, and I'm asking you to try and come along and make it a success with me. And that's just not how that works. Like, guiding is people turn up and they come on the guided walk and then they leave. People turn up, they do the course, and then they've got the skill and they leave and they go and practice it. And that's how it works. And I didn't want to expand that business any more than it already was, because it didn't feel right to me. Whereas sharing my deeper philosophical, theological, like, understanding of the world, my spirituality, just sharing this sort of content, it makes me feel wholesome inside, and I hope it helps other people. I hope it does, but ultimately it's helping me, so that's why I'm doing it. Creativity and empathy versus wisdom and dedication. Creativity and empathy being having an open heart and being quite vulnerable. Wisdom and dedication being where you're closed off and you're moving towards a goal. And although you can't really, from my experience, be in both at the same time, you can move from one to the other. You can flow from one to the other. There's a time to be creative and open your heart and to let that energy flow, and then there's a time to shut that off, and there's a time to focus in and use your experience and get the job done. There's a time for both, and it's important to flow from one to the other and not get stuck in one or the other. Not be in your creative side all the time, because you're just vulnerable, and that's when people come along and they'll take from you. But not to be in that hard shell all the time as well, because you'll push people away, and then when you come back into your creative flow, you'll realize that you're lonely, you've got nobody around you. And so it's really important to flow between the two. My friend Rob, who's in the band Echo Town, who, if you follow me on social media, you'll know that I was supporting them, not music-wise, I was just helping them carry stuff onto the stage, and I jumped around at the front. I did a bit of trying to get the crowd going a bit. Not that I needed to, because their music's amazing. But Rob's qualified PT, and he does movement. It's RH Movement, I think, on Instagram. And we have chats, and one of the things that he learned from doing, I think he did like a meditation retreat or something with a shaman or a spiritual leader of some sort, and she was talking about Native American tribes and how they explain about the transference of energy, and how we all have this metaphorical fire, and doing things like looking after yourself, eating well, training, meditation, all these things that we do that make us feel good, that's almost like you're the same as metaphorically chopping the logs and getting the fuel for the fire, the kindling, the fire lighters, whatever it is that you need to get the fire going. So you've got this big stack of logs behind you. If you've been looking after yourself and you've been doing things that make your happiness, your jar of happiness feel full, and you've got this big stack of logs behind you, and you can just keep the fire roaring strong. Everybody's got their own individual fire that they have to feed, and then you have friendships and relationships, and these friendships and relationships also have a shared fire. So there's a fire in between the two of you as friends, and it's up to both of you to feed that fire with a percentage of your logs. So you're now feeding your own fire and your friendship fire, and they're feeding their own fire and the friendship fire. And we're doing that for each one of our friends. And then sometimes you get into a bit of bother, or something happens and you can't be there for the friendship fire as much. So the friend will have to put more logs on the friendship fire, as in they're going to be there for you, going to, offer you support, offer you guidance. Sometimes it'll happen the other way, where you're putting more logs on the friendship fire. But ultimately, if you're doing that, you're dipping into your reserves, you're dipping into your fuel, and your reserves will go down quicker. Sometimes when it gets real bad, you're putting logs on your fire, the friendship fire and their fire, and then you've got to manage that. That's a massive energy output. And so it's really important to try and always work on yourself first, so that you've got this big healthy stack of fuel behind you. And then when it does go wrong, and when somebody does need help, you can then supply them with the logs. Always keeping your boundaries, and always knowing that when the logs deplete to a certain amount, you're going to stop putting logs on their fire, and you're going to have to retract a little bit and work on yourself, so that your fire doesn't go out. That's a great metaphor for energy, giving energy and receiving energy. I think it's a practical way of looking at it. I think when you're being creative and really empathetic, what happens is you open yourself up to people coming and stealing your logs. And it's really important then to be able to revert back to a bit using your experience and your wisdom, setting boundaries so that can't happen, and understanding that you've only got so much energy to give out, and you've got to harness that, and you've got to look after it. And so moving from creative to wisdom and back again is really important. But I think when you're going into the vulnerable self, what's most important is to know that the people that are around you, you can trust to harness that energy and hold it for you. So when I'm being creative, I know that I can speak to Rick and Rob and the other Rob, and I can speak to Kyle. I can speak to Claire. I've got like 4 or 5 people around me who I can talk to, who I can be creative with, who I can share my wacky ideas with, and they'll be completely honest with me and truthful with me, and they'll hold that energy up. Whether it needs to be redirected, or whether it's a good idea and they just want to push it in that direction that I'm going in with a bit more energy, with a bit more force, then it's like they'll do that. But it's having those people around you, and I think that's also where having the wisdom and the direction really, really helps, because you, with those boundaries that you can set in place, with that experience, with that wisdom, with that direction, you're only going to allow people into your life who will hold you up and will look after you. And sometimes you have to go through that period of time of feeling quite disjointed and toxic, and to find out who those people are, because they'll stand by you no matter what when you're ranting and you're fed up and you're saying this is how it is, and you're just like a cantankerous old man who's stuck in his ways. those people will put their arm around you and smile and know that at some point you're going to flow back into your creative, empathetic side. But through you being that way and them sticking by you, that's built trust now. And they know, or I know that those people are going to be there and they're going to look after me when I go into my vulnerable state. And that's really powerful to know that. I spent some time with Rick and Rob over the weekend, and then they left, and I felt really lonely. And that's what's inspired this understanding, is to think, oh man, like, I really enjoyed chatting with those guys. They were really opening up to me, and I was opening up to them, and we had a really good chat, and I could feel their energy. And I just want to be creative now, and I just want to allow myself to progress. And then I asked myself, why has this come about since Rick and Rob have been to visit? And then I realized that it's because they were vulnerable, they're in creative flow, but they're also finding that balance where it's important. They understand it's important to be wise and to set boundaries. So there's the trust, there's the friendship. That's about all I've got to say today. If you do listen to this and you like what I'm saying, then please subscribe and follow me on Instagram, see what I'm doing. I am posting a lot more now. I hope that this has made sense, and I hope it helps. And I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening.